Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first set of breakout sessions for the Champions for Young Children Symposium. This is our first virtual Champions, and I just wanted to let you guys know I miss seeing you in person, but we're going to hold out hope that in the future, hopefully next year, we'll be together. We are so thankful for Dr. Cooper Woodard to be here to share with us about the meta-play method, a novel theory-based treatment approach for toddlers with autism spectrum disorder. There was a lot of interest in this session, so I'm so glad that you guys are all here. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to cover. You will have the option at the bottom to use the chat box to make comments and share resources. We do ask that you use the Q&A box if you have questions for Dr. Woodard as he's presenting. We're going to have people monitoring both the chat and the question and answer. So hopefully we'll be able to get responses to you quickly. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel at some point as we figure out how to develop a YouTube channel. And we will send out notification to everyone. All attendee microphones are muted and videos are off, so you don't have to worry about people seeing you if you weren't prepared to be seen this morning. All handouts for this session are going to be provided in the link. It looks like Finis has already put that link up there for you, so if you want to access the handout for this session, you can. And as a reminder, if you signed up to receive child care training credit and/or CEUs, you must view this live session in its entirety via Zoom webinar, which is where you are right now. If you have questions about that, you can email scic@mailbox.sc.edu. And that mailbox, that account will be put up on the last slide. And if you are needing to access closed captioning, we put a few notes in the chat, and we are having live captioning today. So we really appreciate that contribution. And without further ado, let's let Dr. Woodard take over and share his information with us. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Heather, and thank you to everyone for coming. It's an honor to be here, and I always like talking about the meta-play method and this project. It's been something I've been working on for quite a while, so it's a real pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you coming. Again, my name is Dr. Cooper Woodard. I'm a psychologist and board-certified behavior analyst, and I live in the Providence, Rhode Island area. I've been working for probably close to 20 years at the Groden Center. The Groden Center is a school for children with autism and other developmental disabilities and associated behavioral challenges, and it's been a real joy to work at the Groden Network, and it's really opened my eyes to some of the struggles that our children face. It was something that really bothered me, that we didn't have a good understanding of the theory or ideas as to where autism came from. And without that, as you know, it's difficult to design an intervention method. So this talk is kind of a retrospective of the last 10 years and starts with a little bit about autism. And then we'll discuss a little bit about what we know about this disorder and how complex it is. I'm going to mention what is best practice at this point, and that is naturalistic developmental behavioral interventions, or NDBIs, and a little bit about current treatments. I'm going to try to get through this kind of quickly. It's going to be a lot of information. This is actually a 2.5-hour presentation squeezed down into the hour that we have. And as a psychologist, I tend to talk too much, so I'm going to try to limit what I talk about, but also I want you to be sure to get the idea and that you understand what this theory is and where the intervention set came from, because that's really the core of what we need to know. So I'll talk a little bit about the origins of the theory. The theory was named the Dynamic Behavior Theory of Autism, or DBT-A. And what happened then is we had a theory, and the theory was not much help unless we could have a treatment associated with it. And that treatment, which is derived from the theoretical principles, is known as metaplay, or the metaplay method. And what I'll do is, once we get to that point of the talk, I'll talk a little bit about the research that we've had. We actually just had another article published, and I can make that information available to you. There's 3 articles in total. And there's quite a few demonstration videos. And if you're like me, you know, seeing is believing, and seeing the videos is really the best part. So I'm going to try to move along quickly. If you have questions, I don't have a way to see what you're asking, but would be glad to make myself available afterwards and give you my email, so that if you'd like to contact me directly, you're certainly welcome to. Okay, let's talk just a little bit about what we know about autism, which is a terrifically complex disorder. It seems like the more we know about autism, the less we know about autism, because it's so complex in its presentation and understanding what it is. Probably 2 years ago, I started working with persons with high functioning autism. At the Groden Center, we work with typically lower functioning, cognitively functioning children, age probably 6 up to 21. And I've recently started working with adults on the spectrum who are less severely impaired. And the basic ideas that come from that are in the theory, amazingly, really are present and are applicable even in this population. But the little bit that we know about autism is that it typically emerges or becomes evident around age 2. And symptom presentation is very, very different from child to child and person to person. And they change across the lifespan. So while we know a lot, we can describe a child with autism pretty well, what happens as that child ages really starts to be much more variable and much more complicated. We know too that there are only genetic commonalities in tops about 20% of persons with autism. So what that means is that if you're looking for commonalities that are genetic, there's only a small group where you will find codes that are repeated that would suggest some kind of genetic etiology or origin of the disorder. So that makes it quite complicated. The disorder is marked by challenges in a number of areas. As you know, challenges in communication and language. There's often a repetitive and restricted focus on objects. Sometimes there's a restricted focus on portions or parts of those objects. And there's a distinct lack of social engagement or interest. These symptoms that I've put up here, again, are widely varied from child to child, and they become even more varied as the child ages. For example, in the adults that I've been working with, the repetitive and restrictive focus is typically not as present as something like a dislike for change or a dislike for adapting to new situations or unexpected situations. So you almost have to hold some of these core symptoms as abstract ideas so that you can really understand what's going on. For me, that meant that this was a difficult to understand form of thinking. and a way of thinking and a way of engaging with the world, which is unlike any other disorder, where you have much more concrete symptomatology. So it's very complicated. We do know these general symptoms, but they are highly variable and highly changeable. We also know that autism is becoming more and more common. Rates continue to rise each year. If you look at the rates, they really just skyrocket. I often get the question, is this because we can identify it or because it's more prevalent? And I'm guessing, as most people would, that it's probably a little bit of both. I can tell you I was very fortunate. My mother, who passed away a couple of years ago, was a early childhood educator, and she had her PhD in early childhood education, and she was also a Piagerian theorist. So I was very fortunate to kind of have that in my back pocket. She spent a lot of time at the University of Buffalo working with people and explaining to people how to become effective teachers. And she told me that in her entire career, she only saw 2 children with autism. So I think it is more prevalent, although we are better able to identify it, and it's much better known than it used to be. So how do we treat autism? That's a very difficult question. Only slightly, maybe less difficult than understanding autism itself. But I can tell you that current best practices support a set of interventions that we could describe as naturalistic developmental behavioral interventions, or NDBIs. You see the citation there if you're interested in learning more about this. I'm just going to touch on it here because it's important that we have evidence-based interventions that are effective for children with autism. As a psychologist and also as a board-certified behavior analyst, I'm committed to showing evidence for interventions, and that's part of what I want to share with you today. So NDBIs are empirically supported interventions for young children with autism, and that means that you have research that is done with integrity that supports the intervention. And these typically merge with applied behavior analytic concepts. The behavior analytic concepts alone, if you're familiar with this area or familiar with board-certified behavior analysts and their type of certification, you've probably come to understand that it's a terrific form of intervention. It's a terrific set of tools. It's, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, insufficient in terms of being able to understand all the complexities of autism. It really is not quite enough. You have to have a knowledge of psychology and also developmental science. So an NDBI is something that merges together the ideas that are core to applied behavior analysis, and also adds in what we know about developmental psychology and merges the two together so that interventions can be optimized. So it's not only that, and it's combining 2 areas that not a whole lot of people have access to, to both areas of expertise, but it suggests a shift that moves away from things that were discrete trial learning and things that were done in mass trials over and over and over again in kind of non-natural environments. It shifts to how do we now take those ideas and integrate them into naturally occurring natural environments, and how, for me, how do we have it present in every part of the day and in everything we do. Behavior analytic and other components, strategies of NDBIs include things such as a three-part contingency, which if you're a behavior analyst, you're familiar with antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. So the three-part contingency is present in NDBIs. It offers a range of behavior analytic techniques. An NDBI should have a clear and manualized practice. It should have checks for fidelity of implementation. Fidelity of implementation is being sure that you're actually implementing the intervention correctly and accurately as it was designed. An NDBI should have a systematic measurement of progress so you can see whether or not, from an objective standpoint, you're making progress. And it should shift from artificial, which we often start with, to natural reinforcements that are available naturally in the environment. It should also be applied and be able to be used in natural environments and situations. So that's kind of what an NDBI is. And MetaPlay actually does achieve all of these criteria. So where are we currently with treatment for autism? There's a number of popular treatment packages. I would point out, interestingly, and not a lot of people noticed this, but I did because I'm kind of obsessed with this area. These areas have not really shown improvement in the core symptoms of autism, except for possibly some very recent research. But the Early Start Denver model, for example, is applied behavior analysis combined with a very, very powerful relationship-based approach that improves and has been shown to improve cognitive and adaptive behavior. Again, I would point out the gold standard and the thing that we're looking for is really improvement in the core symptoms of autism. The Early Start Denver model has shown very good improvement in both cognitive and adaptive behavior. Another treatment package that is known to a lot of people is called pivotal response training. In this package, we have pivotal areas. We have areas such as motivation, responding to multiple cues. These areas, when improved, then spread out to other areas. So you have pivotal central areas. And some of the core features of this package are child choice, being sure that the child has the ability to choose in their environment, focused attention, reinforcement of goal-directed attempts, and other related interventions. So when I started working on the theory that I developed, I was interested in those areas. I was interested in what they could and couldn't do. I was interested in behavior analytics. I was really trying to understand, though, the underlying features of autism so that I could maybe, actually at the time, I just wanted to better understand it myself. But what ended up happening was the development of a theory. So my training, I worked with persons with developmental disabilities and was kind of trained on the job before there was a BCBA. I worked with Jim Bodfish at Western Carolina Center and kind of got my base behavioral training in North Carolina. And after that, went back for my PhD. My PhD was in psychoanalytic psychology, or clinical psychology, and my internship had a psychoanalytic focus. So it really gave me a very, very different perspective. Having behavior analytic background and then psychoanalytic, the two, even though they both have analytic in them, couldn't be any further apart and typically are not combined. But for me, it turned out to be an advantage because I was very interested in how people thought and how those early experiences then developed personality and how people function. So what happened was, after I came to the Groden Center, I was here for a number of years, and we had a presentation by Phil Zalazzo. And in this presentation, Phil talked about the dawn of active thought. And I thought this was a very interesting idea and really got my attention given my background. And this was kind of the seed that was the origin of what is an alternative theory, and that I named the dynamic behavior theory of autism. In the dawn of active thought, Phil was telling us that what happens is the child moves from what he called minimal to recursive consciousness. So when we moved from minimal to recursive, there is a change in the quality or the type of thinking that takes place. And this shift in thinking, again, a kind of a developmental psychology approach, or it isn't kind of a developmental psychology approach, it is a developmental psychology approach. It's also a comment, an analysis of how thinking changes. As you know, you don't come equipped being able to think as an adult. Thinking changes through early childhood and then young adulthood. But this particular very early shift allowed for things that I found very interesting, also knowing something about autism. So it allowed for a wide variety of skills. It allowed, from Phil's talk, it allowed for the ability to name things, to point, to social reference, and for deferred imitation. If you start thinking about those things and you start thinking about my interest in autism, you might notice those are some things that are pretty impaired for a very young child who is diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. So the verbal abilities, naming, responding to name, pointing, which is part of it, it's one of the ADOS key features, key symptoms that we look for. Social referencing, so looking back and referencing other people's faces for social information. And deferred imitation, practicing things that you've seen previous and then acting them out, are all things that when you make that jump from minimal to recursive, appear. If there's anyone here who's well, I'm sure there's a lot of people here who are parents, you'll notice that around age 1 or going into age 2, there's a really distinct shift in how a child thinks. So when I looked into this further, because I became very interested in it, this emergence of skills is known in developmental psychology as the 9-month revolution in thinking. So at the end of the first year in life, there is a very well-known, well-documented shift in thinking that is an established concept in developmental psychology. So I was even more interested in this. Very, very well-known developmental psychologists. Everyone knows Piaget. There's also Tomasello, Stern, Fonagy. I started looking at how they all described this shift, because they all agreed that the shift took place. And what they said was, excuse me, what they said was, we all agree that it takes place, but we all have a different idea about how it happens, what the mechanism was for it happening. They started talking about when a child is able to make the shift from minimal, for what Zalazzo called minimal to recursive. We're going to call it different things. We're going to explain it in different ways. So some of the ways that they talked about these were recursive consciousness, which was Phil Zalazzo's, interiorized drafts, mental representations, referential thinking, aboutness, so more specifically the ability to think about, which is kind of the core of this shift, if you put it in the most straightforward term possible: intersubjective relatedness, secondary representations, thinking about, and meta representation. So when you think about those things together, and I'm going to try to sum this up for you because it's kind of a confusing concept. But really what they were all talking about is when we go from minimal to recursive, we develop the ability to think about things. So you almost develop the ability to have dual tracks of thinking available to you. So you're not only experiencing things one-to-one, but you're kind of able to take a step back now and look at that thing from your own mind's eye or your own mind's eye point of view. So some people might start thinking, well, that sounds like theory of mind. And theory of mind is it's the one approach that's very similar to this, although in theory of mind, we're only talking about typically someone understanding someone else's point of view or someone else's thinking or perspective, but it certainly would fall into this category. All of these developmental psychologists were describing how these things happened, and of course the mechanism was very interesting to me. But they all agreed that this shift allowed the typically developing child to do some very important things. And those included language, naming, symbolization, so one thing standing for another, pretend play, which would be the gold standard, really. I mean, if you can have children, if you have a child with pretend play, it would be unusual, not impossible, because I have seen it, but it would be unusual for them to also have an autism spectrum diagnosis, but it certainly is possible. Pretend play would be something that we would really strive for in child development because it is so important. Pointing, functional object use, so knowing what an object is for. So you see the broadness of this thinking about. It goes everywhere from the spectrum from what an object is for, understanding that something has a use, to understanding someone else's thinking. Deferred imitation, so remembering seeing someone doing something, holding that in your mind, and then knowing I'm going to take that and now act that out. It allows for joint imitation, so me being able to look at someone else and imitate what they're doing. And social referencing, looking to someone and saying, well, what is your response to this? Because you have then, with this shift in thinking, the ability to see that that person has thinking as well. So metaplay is an NDBI based on DBT-A. How much more confusing could I have made that? It's based on a new theory that suggests that autism is a result of early identification with parts and objects instead of people. So what I did was I took the mechanisms that were associated with this shift in thinking that these developmental psychologists told us about. I took those ideas and I used one of them. One of them was Peter Hobson, and Peter Hobson suggested that that shift takes place through a process known as identification. You typically identify, in psychoanalytic terms, with a parent. And for a period of time, you become unified with that parent. You become one and then split away. And that's how identification and normal development would take place. But basically, you kind of link on to the parent and understand that you can see the world because you've identified with that parent. DBT-A suggested that autism, instead of early identification with people, there was an identification with objects and parts of objects. And this is the core of that theory. It's an alternate identification with objects that disrupts the natural emergence of meta-representative thinking at the 9-month revolution in thinking, which is known to emerge at the same time where we first typically see autism symptoms. So what I'm saying here is that in this theory that I developed called DBT-A, that shift from one type of thinking to another type of thinking is disruptive because identification is with objects instead of people. And if it's disrupted, the things that are supposed to happen in recursive thinking don't happen. And the absence of those things is autism. If we go back to the previous slide, you can see the things on I think your right-hand side, it's on my right-hand side, so I hope it's on your right-hand side, are, you know, language naming, symbolization. Those really are, the absence of those are diagnostic for autism. A failure of this thinking explains the many symptoms that we see, and we can explain pretty much each symptom across the lifespan. And so we need a very different form of intervention. This is the theoretical article. This was published back in 2011. If you're interested in it, this explains what I just covered in painful detail, it's a very thick read, but it does explain it in detail. So what I did was I took behavioral strategies that I was aware of and concepts of DBT-A, and we created the metaplay method. And the metaplay method actually tried to reinforce a shift from child's interest in objects to people, from part to whole thinking, any representational thinking or imagining, and we tried to foster the tolerance of human unpredictability. So the theory drove how we created metaplay, and the theory, as I just quickly went through, I hope I'm not going too fast. The theory suggested the child is developing autism because they're identifying with objects instead of people. And that's causing a problem with the natural shift from minimal to recursive thinking. Okay? So to kind of redirect the trajectory, what we need to do is flood the child and reinforce the child for any of one of these four things. And the creation of those four things became metaplay. We started with our first child, and I just want to show you his ADAS testing video.
No, don't eat it. Hold it.
So the child is supposed to respond to my name. This is the first part of a ADAS test.
Holden. Is there any way that you can get him to respond his name really distinctly?
So is that what you do is you move on to asking?
Sure. Here? Yeah, or anywhere where it's pretty distinct.
Holden. Holden. Holden.
And then they can try with anything available to them, some clapping, some...
Boom!
Holden. 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 Eyes. Eyes.
We found some fascinating blocks. That's
Oh, I know.
yeah.
So this is another part of this child's diagnostic test when we started. He was our pilot person. So the goal here is to kind of look at me and ask for this. You can see he does not. He'll take it from me. He does not ask for my help. He doesn't reference me. We're looking for eye contact, joint attention. We're looking for some type of interaction. And you'll notice the minute I put something in his way, he will lose interest. And he goes back to something that has very repetitive.
Where's Holden?
Now, this is
Where's Holden? There you are! Where's Holden? Where's Holden? Peekaboo! Peekaboo! Where's Holden?
You can see
Peekaboo!
what he's interested in. I think he actually does do it a little bit. But what he really wants is the
Where's Holden? Here you go.
No.
Okay. So this was our pilot person. He had a social affect score of 20, a restricted and repetitive behavior score of 2. His total score was 22, and his severity of autism was 8, which is highly autistic. What we did was we met with the family for 5 months. During this time, we developed what became the Metaplay method activities. We developed them with the family and tested them. We met with them twice a month, and the participant had 2 older siblings. We found at the end of this, we redid the ADAS test, and what we found was that the symptom severity had dropped to 2. To 3, and you'll see that the different components of it all fell, and the severity score went down as well. So this was really, really significant and interesting for us. And actually, at the end of treatment, the mom kind of said, "Thank you for kind of taking care of that autism thing." And we left and stood out in the street and thought, well, that's not supposed to happen, isn't it? But here's some pretend play with the same child after 5 months.
Or you want a 4?
Very nice.
Good
Can I have
job.
some tea? Can I have some tea too? Oh, and Mom needs some. There you go. Glug, 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 glug. Very
You want to
nice.
drink
You ready?
yours?
Get your cup. You ready? Whoops.
Oh, you need more.
Need some more?
Oh.
Yeah, you're going to be a big
Okay.
drinker.
So this pretend play is really something we look at.
Very good.
Imitation.
Delicious.
Again.
He's
Okay.
asking for a gas.
Here you go. You put yours down. You take the tea.
You'll also see him
Take
blow
the
on
tea.
it, which is
You want me to pour? I'll pour. Bloop, 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 bloop. Bloop.
Oh,
That was
yeah.
a big sip.
Again.
Okay, here we go. Glug, 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 glug,
leads to
glug.
shared
Glug,
enjoyment.
glug, 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 glug. Glug, glug, glug. Delicious.
Ooh, mine was hot.
Is yours hot? Is it hot? Good job.
So those are things that we're looking for. We're looking for shared enjoyment, joint attention, imitation, and certainly pretend play. So we published that pilot study. So this is the second study we have. If you're wanting a copy of this, I can certainly give it to you, and it explains it in a lot of detail. And then we thought, well, we need to move on, and we need to try it with a larger group. So we got 7 additional children and 1 control participant, and they took part in 6 months of treatment, which were basically formalized versions of what we developed with the pilot student participant. And that became known as the Metaplay method. And the Metaplay method is comprised now of 14 activities, and we tried to integrate it in all parts of the child's functioning. This is what it looked like originally. I know that this looks like a random group of things, but it really is planned, sequenced activities and materials that are very, very much based on the theory that we developed. Some are traditional toys that are sequenced to go from objects to people. So you see on the left-hand side, cars that are also people, people that are almost not people, and then baby dolls and people. And you see things pulled apart, which kind of got me a lot of frowns when I discussed it with the people at the toy store that I was cutting up dolls. But anyway, amazingly, this is very difficult to find. And so we had to create a lot of these activities and materials ourselves. This is what it looks like today. It looks a whole lot better than the version that I developed, but in practice and theory, the ideas are still very much the same, and it's been manualized. So here is one of the activities. This one was called What's in the Box. So this was based on the idea of having an interior draft of what's going on in the box. This is where we start.
Go ahead.
Get it? Where is it?
Go get it, buddy.
No!
Where is it?
No!
You get it? Hey, you got it. Good job.
No.
You get it?
So you can see, I should have renamed this I Hate the Box, because typically when kids started, that was their response. But once the child's accustomed to reaching in the box, we have a number and variety of items in the box change. They become more people-based. The artificial reinforcers are replaced with natural reinforcers like social reciprocity, and we reinforce human-like toys that are selected. So you'll see the poor box was kind of torn apart, which we got accustomed to. But this was later What's in the Box skills with the same child.
Hold it.
Where's the cup? I need the cup. Where's the cup? It's the box. I need the cup. Where's the cup? The cup! You did it! Good job! Okay, you ready? Ready. Ready? Where's the dinosaur? Dinosaur! Dinosaur! You did it! The dinosaur! Yay! Look how shiny!
Hold it.
So that's something that we typically also would not see, would be shyness and coyness. But you can see the progression from where we started to where we ended. Just so you know, it happens with other children. This is another child who also hated the box. Very painful what's in the box. And this is the same child. This was not the first one, was the pilot child. These children are in our group study. Not working. Let me try. Let me see if I can get this video for you. I don't see it. I would have to pull it back up. So I'm sorry about that. Shoot, I was doing so well here. What happens, I'll tell you a little bit about what happens. He's extremely cooperative, a lot of good eye contact, and it goes very well. Let me go. So this is a different activity. This one's called Perm. And you'll see where we started with this student.
There he is! Uh-oh! Not your favorite game, huh?
Luca.
Luca. Luca. Sorry. Peekaboo! Come out here for me.
So this is the
big guy. You ready?
It was impossible. I just
Where's
could not
Luca?
get
Peekaboo!
any kind of interest in this whatsoever.
Luca!
But at one point, he did it.
Luca! Luca, where is he? There you are!
He's gone again. Where'd he go?
Really, absolutely no interest at all. And then this was, this is how things went as treatment.
Again? Again? Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
so really dramatic improvements. I actually went back 2 years later to get some permissions from the parents so I could show you these. And he was having a play date. You'll see that there's still some indications of ASD, but it's not nearly as intensive as the ADOS would have predicted.
Luca, what did you do today? What did you do today? Did you play with, who'd you play with?
Lincoln.
Yeah. Did you have fun? Yeah. Are you going to play with him again tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah? What are you guys going to play with? You going to do dinosaurs or the ball?
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs?
I want new dinosaurs tomorrow morning.
You do?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I guess we can do that.
A Kentrosaurus and a Colossus.
A Colossosaurus? Is there such thing as a
No,
Colossosaurus?
No, Colossus is in the Kentrosaurus.
Oh,
We
okay.
got 2 dinosaurs.
Yeah.
You got 2 dinosaurs.
1, 2. 1, 2.
Thank you.
You're doing-
Thank you, he says. So we have some more examples. I'm going to run out of time as I usually do, but this is a very frustrated putting people together, and this is a very cooperative one. So in our current research, we worked with 7 toddlers. We tested them just like with a pilot person. We tested them with the ADOS. In the EI program, they were in EI programs. They had similar services supports. The parents were trained on the concepts of DBT-A, the theory, and they were trained on the interventions, which were the meta-play interventions. Again, we went out twice monthly with fidelity checks to make sure it was being done correctly. They completed a number of inventories, and then we repeated ADOS testing at the end of 6 months. This first person was a control person who we were not able to get to, unfortunately, and this person did not get treatment and went actually from 9 to 10, so actually his severity score increased. Participant 1, again, this is the same one that you saw earlier. This is participant 2, so we saw a very, very positive impact. Participant 3 did very well. They went from a severity score of 10 to 4. And actually all 8 participants had a positive change from pre to post treatment. So it was a very successful intervention set. This was just recently published in Research in Developmental Disabilities. It's called Feasibility of a Play-Based Intervention Set for Toddlers with Autism. It describes it very, very clearly so that you really see what happens and how the child changed over time. So to kind of sum this up, I hope I haven't gone too fast, but meta-play is an intervention set that is derived from a novel theory. The theory has good explanatory power. So if you're interested in the theory, it would be that first article that I showed you. But how I try to explain it to people so that it's clear is I will tell them, at the end of the first year of life and into the beginning of the second year, there's a dramatic shift in thinking. Everybody accepts that shift as real and taking place. It's not something that I came up with. It's something that I just became aware of and researched and tried to understand. If that shift doesn't take place, the consequences are really diagnostic for autism. So you need to understand how you get from stage 1 to stage 2 of that thinking, perhaps to lessen or otherwise affect those autism symptoms and reduce them. To do that, you have to understand the mechanism of how that thinking changes, which is theoretical, and it's explained in different ways by different theorists. The approach that I used was identification with a parent, because that's what made best sense to me. If you're interested in more about that, there is a book by Peter Hobson called The Cradle of Thought, and he explains it in detail how that shift is related to autism. So we built on those ideas of identification and said, if that's true, how do we take that theoretical idea and combine it with behavioral concepts so that we can get children back on that trajectory of identifying with people instead of objects and parts of objects? How do I shift your interest from people back, from objects back to people? We want you to be identified with a person. So how do I take where you are and reinforce your movement towards people? By doing that, we want to reignite this ability to move from minimal to recursive consciousness and develop the cognitive substrates that you and I enjoy in all of our thinking as an adult and a typically developing adult. So that's the goal of MetaPlay, is to take the child where he or she is and move them back towards people, move them back towards wholes, move them back towards the unpredictability of people and imaginary or symbolic thinking. The thing that I like about this, the MetaPlay, well, I like a lot of things about it because we developed it, but the thing that I really like about it is that it gives people something to do. It's not as much a series of ideas or very abstract ideas that you have to apply and learn when to apply. It actually has a set of activities, and the more the better. And the more diverse you can take the ideas and apply them to other areas of interest in the child's day, the better. So you can do this at home, you can do this in school, you can do it in the car, you can do it wherever. Once the parent understands the idea, they can adapt that idea and apply it in different situations. So the play activities of MetaPlay are specifically designed to foster identification with people and away from objects, and to promote thinking about thinking. So I'm promoting the type of thinking that is the ability to think about things, and that's recursive consciousness. And that's the foundation for many other skills and abilities that are really absent in autism. So I hope I've explained that clearly, and I hope I didn't raise more questions than answers. But that is the idea behind MetaPlay and the dynamic behavior theory of autism. And I, again, very much appreciate being able to present it to you, and welcome any type of questions that you might have, and appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Dr. Woodard. And if you have questions, you can type them in the Q&A, and we will make sure that Dr. Woodard gets those. I just have a few end of session housekeeping things to share with you. If you have questions, not necessarily related to the content, and you need to reach out to us, you can use our email, which is on this slide, and the email address is scic@mailbox.sc.edu. You can learn more about Champions and get access to these recorded sessions and handouts through our website that's listed here. Also, Finis put in the chat a link to that, so you can get those now. I'm going to launch I don't think we got questions.
Heather?
Oh, yes.
I have one question here. I think it's, they're requesting information about the book.
Okay.
I think the book that they're talking about is Peter Hobson's Cradle of Thought, and I can do better than that. I can not only tell you about it, but I can show it to you. So this, I think you can see it. Can you see that?
Sort of, a little closer to the camera. Yes. So the cradle of thought.
Yeah. This is by Peter Hobson. He is a researcher and theorist from Oxford University in England. And this is a terrific book if you're interested in this area. I would really encourage anybody who has an interest in this area to get it. It explains quite a bit about it and would really make you better understand some of the things we talked about today.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to launch a session evaluation on the screen so you all can begin to do that. It should show up as a separate little window for you to answer those questions. I think, Dr. Werder, if you click out of that window on your screen, if it popped up on your screen, then they can still see the closing slide. Yes. Okay. And if you attended, I noticed some folks have attended by phone. If you have attended by phone and you are seeking child care training credit or CEUs, please email us at scic@mailbox.sc.edu and include your name, the session you attended, and the phone number with which you attended that session so that we can make sure that we are able to match up your participation with the CEU list. We like to strive for 100% session evaluation completion, and we're right at 48%. So I know that some of you are probably thinking hard about the response you want to give, and that's wonderful. Looks like.
While you wait for that, Heather, would you like me to answer a question that was texted to me?
Yes, that
Okay.
sounds great.
So the question is, how do we incorporate in the classroom with individual children, and will there be a training or is there a training? So what we did was when we created the materials all come in a box, and the box comes with a manual. It doesn't, parents can incorporate this, or you can incorporate it in the classroom. It's the type of activities you could do anywhere and would be just as appropriate to a classroom and as at home. So I always encourage people to do it in both locations. We've trained many different teachers on this. TeachTown also has demonstration videos that show the actual implementation of the activities live, so that you can see how to do it. It's not difficult. You just have to understand the concepts, and then you'll see the activities and you'll say, oh, of course, that was the activity. That makes sense. And they're divided up in the manual into 4 different stages, starting with something that's really almost hand over hand learning that's reinforced, and then it becomes more and more abstract and complex. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. I want to also share my thanks for Dr. Woodard again, and also for our captioner who's been making sure that we have closed caption going throughout. We will send an email when the recording is ready, and with a link to where it is to folks that have registered. And that will probably be about a week or so. So if you don't see it tomorrow, that's because we're still working on it and figuring all of this technology out. I really appreciate all of you who came to join us. It looks like there's a question about the kit and costs. Is there a website that we can put into the chat that folks can explore?
I think you can go to the Teachtown website. I think they would probably have how to contact them. It's Teachtown. I think it's teachtown.com.
Okay.
If you put Teachtown Metaplay into a browser, I'm sure it would take you to it.
Okay, put that information in the chat. Thank you all very much. We're still at 88%. Any others? Up. Now we're climbing back up.
You should be an auctioneer, Heather.
I know, right? I've learned several ways to try to influence people to follow my directions. As you have, that's kind of your whole work, right? Influencing people to follow your directions.
Yes, psychologists are notoriously nosy and interested in motivation.
Oh, 95%, you guys, we're almost there. This is our last session for Champions for today. Tomorrow we will have a featured talk and another set of breakout sessions and the time frame will be the same, 10 o'clock to 12:30. And we're at 100%. You guys are the best. Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye, guys.
Bye, thank you.